All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're talking about MongoDB, and we're going to unpack some of its core features, the things that really change how you think about storing data. So if you've spent most of your time in the world of SQL, you're probably used to thinking in terms of very strict tables, columns, and rows, right? Well, MongoDB is going to ask you to look at data in a whole new way. So what exactly is MongoDB? The official definition is an open-source, document-oriented, NoSQL database. Now, that is a mouthful, I know, but trust me, every single word in that definition is important. So let's break it down piece by piece.
Okay, so let's tackle that first big piece of the puzzle, document database. This concept is really the biggest shift you'll make when moving from a traditional relational database.
Yeah, it's a fair question, right? Document-oriented sounds kind of technical. But the big idea here is to shift your thinking away from rows in a table and towards, well, self-contained documents.
So, in MongoDB, the most basic unit of data, what you'd normally call a record or a row in the SQL world, is called a document. And a document is basically just a structure of field and value pairs. If you've ever worked with JSON, this is going to look incredibly familiar.
Now, this little table here is super helpful for translating what you already know. What you'd call a table becomes a collection in MongoDB. A record is now a document, and columns are just fields. And even something complex like joins gets a rethink. You often just embed related data right inside a document, which is a really, really powerful concept.
Okay, so we know what a document is, but so what? Why is this model so powerful? Let's get into the practical advantages of doing things this way.
And that's the real question, isn't it? It's cool that it's different, but is it actually better? What do you gain by storing data this way?
Well, it really comes down to a couple of huge benefits. For starters, because the document structure is so much like JSON, it maps almost perfectly to the objects you use every day in languages like JavaScript, Python, or Java. It just feels more natural to code against. And second, by embedding related info, like putting a user's address inside the user document, you can get rid of a lot of those expensive database joins, which can be a massive win for performance.
All right, let's move on to the next big concept. And this is a real mind bender for folks coming from SQL. We're talking about freedom from schemas.
And this is where things get really interesting. In a SQL table, you know the drill. Every single row has to have the exact same columns, no exceptions. But what happens when your data isn't so neat and tidy?
This is where MongoDB introduces this idea of being schemaless. Now, that doesn't mean it's a total free-for-all with no structure. It just means the database isn't the one enforcing it. You can have a single collection, that's our new word for table, and it can hold documents that look totally different from one another. It's incredibly flexible.
And you can see that difference laid out pretty clearly here. On the one hand, you have the rigid schema of a traditional database, where every row must conform, and on the other, the flexible schema you get with MongoDB, where documents in the same collection can have different fields.
And this example really hits it home. You could have a single collection, and in that same collection, you could have these two completely different documents. One just has a name and an age, the other has a social security number, a name, and a whole array of groups. This kind of flexibility is perfect for apps that need to evolve and change over time.
So all this flexibility is fantastic for developers, right? But you might be wondering, how does the database actually handle all this under the hood? How does it stay fast and efficient?
Yes, a really important technical question. We as developers think in this JSON-like way, but for storage and speed, the database needs something a bit more robust.
And the answer to that question is something called BSON. It stands for binary JSON. You can think of it like a supercharged binary version of JSON. It's the secret sauce that lets MongoDB store your documents in a way that's incredibly fast to read and search through.
And BSON is more than just a binary copy of JSON. It actually extends it with some really useful data types you need in a database, like proper date formats. And maybe most importantly, it introduces the _ID field. This acts as the unique primary key for every single document, and the database can even generate it for you automatically.
So, if there's one big idea to take away from all this, it's this. MongoDB is all about flexible documents, not rigid rows. And that fundamental shift is what makes it so powerful for the kinds of applications we're building today.
And there you have it, a quick tour of MongoDB's core features. If this explainer helped clear things up for you, we'd really appreciate it if you'd like, share, and subscribe for more.
And I'll leave you with a question to chew on. How would this document model change the way you approach your next project? Thanks for joining us.